Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Correll. We've been doing this for quite a long time now. We're over 200 episodes. I am here with my compatriot in world empowerment, Jan Jeremias. And how does it feel to be back on the tube again?
It feels great. And I can't believe 200 episodes that we've done.
Yeah.
I was
just went by so quickly.
I know. I was talking about it over the weekend and I mentioned it and everybody was like, wow.
So we wanted to acknowledge that so that we could really invite you all to a very special time with a guy that we think the world of, Mr. Austin Jacob, who has been a participant in my other podcast. He is an accomplished human being working at improving every day. And I can't wait to get into this discussion and see where we go. So just to kind of set the table, before we do that, Austin, how are you doing today?
Oh, very well, as always.
Good. And what's the weather like down there in Georgia?
It's getting up there. You just like let the pool out and took the cover off. So it's definitely that, but getting ready to be that time.
I think you'll appreciate this. I've got two kinds of magnolias in my backyard, and they're all in full bloom now as of yesterday. The pink ones came out on Easter, but the others we've been looking at and enjoying for over a week. So just to reset the table, what we're doing is we're having conversations with each other, and y'all get to listen in. And the goal here is to maybe present some empowerment in the world and give you all some options, and maybe, when we're done with the hour, you'll walk away with something that's very powerful for you that you can rely on, or at least recall in a situation when you get into a tight spot. I do have some friends who say, what would Bill say? Or what would Jan say? And then after this, maybe it's what would Austin say? So I think with all of that, we'll just kind of dive in. We're unscripted. We sort of leap out of a virtual airplane. I don't even think we bothered packing a parachute or anything, do we, Jan?
Not really.
We just fly.
Not really at all.
We just fly. The goal here is for us to be present and for us to generate this conversation from nothing. And guess what? That's impossible because if you're over the age of 2 or 3, you've got history that you remember, and it's going to come out every single time. So, credential-wise, I'm a business owner. I'm also a business and personal coach, among a whole bunch of different things. And my friend Jan puts my little resume to shame. She is one of the most amazing human beings that I know. And Austin, I've got a lot more to learn about your resume, but you're the kind of guy who is willing to burn bridges, behind you, or ships, if you will, and give yourself no retreat and just move on in life and make great things happen.
That's right. Yeah, I'm creating my own retreat.
If you're going to have a story, you might as well be the author, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, and just for the audience, I got no structure for this. So this is very authentic. And honestly, that's one of my personal core values. It's led me very far with just relying on who do I need to be in this moment that resonates with me.
You mean we didn't like, phony you into this by telling you it was a seance or something?
Oh no, I got the plane ticket yesterday.
Oh, okay, good. So with all of that going on, what's kind of the main thing for you both this week?
Well, I
Dan?
just yeah, just off of what you said, Bill, I wondered what people would say that you like, what would Bill say? What would Austin say? What would Jan say? And I could think of a few things I've heard lately, but the question is if you had like somebody in your life who like you talk to or who listens, what would they say that you've said, Bill? I hope that made sense as I said it.
Yeah, I mean that we're sort of taking a chance lighting the candle, aren't we?
Yep, we are.
But you know what? We knew the job was dangerous when we took it. It's a little risk in everything. So why don't we, shoot for the moon and hopefully get a little some happy people out there.
Yeah. So, what would people say if you were in their head? Like, I know what my students have said to me and what, a client said to me this morning, a phrase that I had used that she keeps on like saying to herself when things get challenging. And that was, I recently said to her, just let it be.
Yeah.
Just let
Well,
it be.
I can tell you what people have said, Jan.
Okay. Telling me what people have said. Yeah.
Back when I had a bunch of employees and they'd move on to bigger and better things, which was always the plan for them to come through my place as kind of a transformational experience, either getting their college education or trying their wings on after they got their college education, and so I tried to just create an environment where people were invited to make mistakes often. And I can remember one of the folks who went to work for what was it, Mars, Peter Paul, and took over their IT department and had 28 people reporting to him. And he got into a situation with somebody where he didn't know an answer to a question and he found himself very confrontive. Well, this is what he told me when I ran into him about 4 years later. And he said, all of a sudden, I could hear your voice in the back of my head. And it was saying, you know what, Anurag, I know you're afraid. Just get going, will you? Let's not waste a lot of time on your fear. And he said, and I broke out laughing, and everybody was wondering what the heck was wrong with me. He said, it was easy as pie after that. All the tension was gone.
Mhm.
How about you, Austin?
I think a common phrase I hear reflected back to me is every moment is a new moment. But have you thought of this?
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice.
I mean,
Yeah.
my other one is my just because of my yoga background, people will say to me, shoulders back. Exactly. I have my like my students who messaged me saying I was hiking and all I could think of was you in my head saying, like,
Yes.
lengthen your spine and shoulders back. So I laugh,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Another one I hear often too is, "Oh, I've missed your smile." And although that is flattering and all, what it really reads to me is like the small gestures in life, passing someone at the mall, the checkout lady, the wherever you go, the smallest things really resonate more than you can sometimes see surface level. And for me it's usually, oh, I missed you smile like
Well, most of the communications is nonverbal,
there you
especially
go.
with animals. You know, you can have a heck of a conversation with a dog who's happy to see you without ever saying a word. And then
Mm.
when you say the words, you're inviting it to respond in whatever the way that it possibly can. But it's the same thing with children. It's the same thing with if either of you have done public speaking, you're at the front of the room and all the people are watching you, and you're kind of looking around just to make eye contact and just generate this connection just to see whether or not it's landing over there. So what you're saying about leaving people with kind of a flavor of, what, I don't know about Austin, but I love seeing his smile. That's pretty great. It'd be okay to be known that way, wouldn't it?
I guess so, yeah. It sure does put a lot of pressure on me now that I just threw that out there.
But I have
Okay.
But I have to say that, to me, that's really beautiful. Like I look at my dad, who Bill knows passed away 2 years ago, February, and that was the one thing. I mean, I would say hundreds of people said Herb had the greatest smile. Like everybody said it. And, to the extent where, I mean, I knew he did, but my mother even said, having lived with him for, like they were married for over 60 years, she's like, I realized it, but I didn't like on a different level. She said, I kind of realized it because all of a sudden, something that becomes so much like part of life, all of a sudden it brings that kind of special quality to it where everybody noticed it. And
Yeah.
so I would say all like fantastic, Austin, because that's not a bad thing to be known for.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm owning it. I'm owning it.
Okay, yeah.
And you don't have to.
I,
There's another good old friend of mine who always said, you know what, Bill? Anybody who says something good about you or says something bad about you says more about them than it does about you. Okay.
There you go.
And that's kind of neat, to be the recipient of other people opening up their world for a minute to share it with you. And that's one of the really cool things for me. I'm going to share a little secret with you. I get a lot of joy out of the elderly people in my life. As old as I am, believe it or not, I know older people. And then I absolutely love my 4, 5, and 6-year-old buddies. And it just it's about the neatest thing in the world to get a little kid smile out of somebody who's 86 years old and have them just get completely beside themselves with joy and anticipation. And I got to tell you, I love my stepmother so much. She just turned 86 in February, and when we call her to go play mini golf, you would have thought we were inviting her to go see an opera or something. She just gets so excited about it. She goes, "Let's go do this." And I say, "Well, and you're going to kick my butt, right?" And she goes, "Well, we'll see. But the neat thing is that every once in a while I make a connection with somebody who's like 4, 5, or 6 years old. I did a trip down to Florida last year. I met this amazing little girl named Corinna. And from a friend of mine who I've only known on Facebook for about 10 or 12 years, I got to her house. Corinna comes down the stairs, and about the fourth stair from the bottom, she leaps into my arms, like never seen me before. And it's like, okay. And I looked at Kathy and I said, "Wow, she's friendly." She said, "Yeah, she is, but not like that, Bill." So it's kind of like to have we have auras and we have all sorts of vibrations, and those vibrations are not understood by most human beings, but I think kids and animals get it. I think they really do get it.
Yeah, I would also add to that, even like biolife plants. You know, I mean, maybe I might be going too deep here, but I also believe that just about everything. Well, everything has a consciousness, has a vibration. There's an essence to it. It's really a perspective shift. How deep do you want this rabbit hole to go? Because as far as deep as you want it to go, that's how deep it's going to go. What you believe is what you see.
Yeah, and be content with making stuff up. There is nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you live in a world that gives you satisfaction because you got a great story about it, I mean, I know women that name their plants.
Mhm.
I don't know too many guys that do that. I think they name other things like their shotguns and whatever. But all right, well, I'm now going to have to take that sexist comment out of there. It's not just women. It's like I know some people that name their plants.
Yeah, my lucky bamboo over there, his name is Larry.
Well, okay. We had a friend on here, Lisa, and I started making caprese salad about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, posting it on Facebook. All of a sudden, I was really taken with fresh basil. So I had lunch with her. She brought me this little planter that's specifically for growing basil in it. It had a wick that went down into I still have it. My wife is propagating it right now. And we did call the plant basil.
Small truth.
Yeah. like the English basil, not like the plant name with an E.
But I think it's really interesting when we give things a name. when we all of a sudden it's like there is that form of acknowledgement or appreciation or endearment. Um,
Endearment.
yeah, it gives it a little bit of a different kind of energy. And that might also be like for me, lately I have like, we all have like voices in our head, and I named one of mine. And so whenever it pops in, I kind of like, oh, there they are again, or there she is again. And it makes me laugh. It's kind of like this funny thing of like, oh my gosh, there she is. And it reminds me of a Woody Allen movie where his mother passes away and she's up in heaven and she's talking to him and nagging him, like being Woody Allen, like she's like henpecking him from heaven. And
Yeah,
so that's my voice is like, you know, and it makes me smile and laugh. And it takes a little bit of the, I don't know, I think the negativity out of it
yeah,
and gives it all kind of like the humanness and kind of the humor that's involved in that, which I think is also really valuable.
Yeah,
yeah,
I would say it's a great way to reframe. Like, think of something simplistic, like you're at school and you have a favorite notebook, but you could refer to it as, giving it a name, so to speak, but you're still referring to it as, oh, that's my favorite notebook. That's my good notebook. You're giving it a name, but when you, like you said, I forget the term you used, but when you give it more of like a, um I don't know, a vibe, you're casting a human relation almost onto it. It lessens that judgment, one on the object, but also on yourself. And you're just having a good time at that point.
That's
yeah.
right. I mean, I laugh now when it shows up and I'm like, oh my gosh, there she is again.
Well, a name is like an address, okay? It's like you're giving a location in time and space, for uh, everything about basil. It brings me joy to think about watching basil be these little tiny little shoots, and then a little, you know, I don't know. They don't even look like basil when they first start. They look like something else, but then it got huge, and then it turned into almost like a tree, for God's sake. That basil was a beast and broke my heart when my wife killed it. I'm sorry, honey, I got to turn you in. I think there's probably no statute of limitations on murdering a basil. So, but point is that you name the things that are you're endeared to and endear you. Okay, and when you get to be the person who names, I don't know about you, I've been very generous with pet names for all my loved ones. And all of the folks who came through my doors for one reason or another, I still do it. I still find a great quality in people that I'm with in networking and stuff. There, I mean, a gal can be smiley, and another guy can be handsome. Another guy can be, rocky. Just like something to just put a little bit of a connection and a string between the two of us. When he thinks about me or she thinks about me, I don't know what they think about. But when I think about them, there's a rockiness about it, or a missy, or so it's an endearing sort of a, yeah, we're peers and we're cool, and it's like I call Jan my buddy Ed and my twin. I just, I don't know. It's a character flaw. I like to dress people up in a persona that I think amplifies their superpowers. All of that is to say, naming stuff, gives it a location you can go back to. It's kind of like a guy who's been raised around a herd of animals. All those cows were just cows that came through. You remember that calf that broke its leg? You spent the whole wintertime nursing it and getting it back up to speed, and you gave it a name, of Cubby or whatever it was. I don't know if you ever saw City Slickers. I don't know, maybe it was Norman, but the point is that you don't eat, animals that you've given a name to. They're loved ones now. So I don't know. I think people are like that too a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, that word endearment. That's it
Hmm.
right there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it also brings down that whole element of endearment and appreciation. Like there is an appreciation there as well. I think when you do that with other people, Bill, like there's like I think that's one thing you always put across that you appreciate everyone. And I think
Yes.
that that name brings sort of like that you appreciate their uniqueness and their authenticity for you, and that's how you convey that.
And that's easy because everybody is unique, you know?
They
And
are.
if we taught our kids nothing more than every single person that you meet is different than every other single person you're ever going to meet, take a moment and find out what's special about them in the moment. Have a short conversation and just see if the two of you can come up with some sort of a connection or something in common or something that you learn, you know? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's fascinating. It makes me think, what if people took a moment to think of, you know, if I were standing outside myself, what's a good nickname that I would give myself to almost endear to their own like
Mhm.
authentic self. And this other quote's coming to me. It's by Florence Chevelle Shin, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, but it's something along the lines of, no man is your friend and no man is your enemy, but every man is your teacher. And because this is all about unifying in a diverse world, like you said, no one is the same. And how boring would that be if we were all the same?
yeah. Yeah, the
Oh,
neat part of it is diversity works best when you're not talking about it, you're just being, you know?
mhm.
The talking about it is like I used to date a girl and she said if you talk too much about sex, you ruin it, you know? So for me, it's a little bit, kind of works for diversity too. Just let it be. Everybody who comes into the space is cool and they deserve to be here. Honor them, give them their place in the universe. And Jan, if
Right.
at all possible, ask them if they need a hug or they need to be listened to, or something
They
else.
they need help.
Or help, yes.
Oh, yeah. Do they need to be heard? Do they need a hug? Do they need to be helped?
Those
So,
3 questions are access to immediate connection.
yeah, but I love that because I think there are things like, and when you're in a space where you can be, where like the fact that everybody is different is welcomed.
Yeah,
I think it's something that you experience and that you feel right away. It, because it feels like you're home. And and I think in more ways than one. I mean, one is that you feel like you're home because you're around people that, but you also feel because you're at home in yourself. And there's no need to pretend you're anything else. And, so that's such I mean, some of us have the privilege of being in groups like that, where we're around people or we've surrounded ourselves with people that are
yeah,
truly, not to say that you can't be that anywhere, but I mean, because you can go in and be who you are. I mean, that's what I do. It's just that sometimes it's not very welcome.
yeah. You know,
That is a very nurturing feeling to be able to surround yourself with people that almost like, think of when you go to, maybe not everyone can relate, but you go to your grandma's house and the energy there is, it's so non-judgmental. No one's concerning themselves with comparison or, wanting to know a whole lot about your why. It's just, you're who, what makes you special, what makes you you, and that's what brings the joy. And imagine if we could almost like wear that grandma's house armor.
I just recreate it with smells of grandma, just like aromas
all
that
about grandma, yeah,
are all about grandma. But as you're saying that, it reminded me of my grandmother because my grandmother was a very, very integral part of my life, and I lived with her for quite a while. And she was probably one of the most non-judgmental people I've ever met in my life. Like everybody never had a bad word to say about anybody and was always so accepting of everybody. And so it was, but as you're saying that, I think that for me, what a beautiful thing to go into, like to keep that in mind of like when you're going into a situation. Well, I'm wearing grandma right now. I'm just gonna go into every situation with that energy.
I would say it's also important because what's coming to mind for me is, I think I do recognize that maybe that's why people are so easily magnetized towards me, because I'm very openly accepting to others. So I think of the polarity for me is going to be, as I go along my my long journey here, is be doing it for myself more than maybe a little bit more than I'm doing it for everybody else.
Mhm.
I'm
I,
kind of left with a flavor, of um, the need for people to identify what and who they are, when they come into a space. We never had to do that when I was growing up, but it's almost like folks have to have an elevator speech right now, like they're going to a networking meeting or something, right? Like once you say the words you say, people will immediately understand and they'll get you. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. If you stop telling people who and what you are and you started asking them a question about what do you really love, what's great about your life, and start engaging them in a conversation that matters, they're not going to remember what you said when they walk out the door anyway. They're only going to remember how you made them feel. And so why not make them feel great? And why not make yourself feel great? It's okay to generate goosies on the spot, right?
and I also think of just like if you don't really need to say much because if you just go in and you are who you are, you don't really need to say much. It's kind of like if you walk the talk, its actions always speak louder than words. So
Yeah.
I like what we
Presence.
were doing on the unique part. Can we spend a little bit more time talking about if we just train kids to recognize there are no two human beings alive today that will ever live in the future or ever lived before that are the same? Do you think kids could handle that?
I think it would come down to maybe how are we articulating it to them? Because in the same way we like to, or rather, we have a tendency to show them what to think, and this is why you should think what you think.
Yes.
If we can reframe this for your authentic expression, but in terms of learning, it's more, in my personal opinion, it's more empowering to teach them how to think, how to come up, how to use this information, these energies of the realities we live in their own way, because that's what is making you unique. And then maybe that's how you stem into, and that's what makes you unique. Maybe
Yeah.
add to that.
I guess I would just, to focus more on. I mean, I love that, Austin. First of all, I think that's really valuable what you shared. I think in addition, like sort of being able to help kids cultivate and sort of nurture their gifts, which I don't think is, especially in our school system in the US, I don't think that's celebrated at all,
Yeah.
or enough. And the fact is, I was listening to a really great podcast, and they were talking about creativity and the fact of the word amateur. And the word amateur actually comes from the Latin word meaning to love. And the fact that it's so contrary what we think of as amateurish, like that's amateurish, meaning we're not an expert at it. And what if you
Sophomore.
could just, yeah, and what if we could just do something because we loved it? And
Yes.
that's what I would love to instill in kids, like just to do something because you love it, not because you want to. They talk about the fact like all of a sudden you start to like delve into a new creative project, and people are like, "Are you going to make that a career? Like, are you going to do that as part of your business, kind of thing?" And what about like, what if you just did it because you loved to do it?
Yeah.
And it's not about being like having a quote unquote being a profession or being an expert at it. And so that's what I would love to instill in kids, like this whole idea of like just find something you love and excel at that, or just don't even excel, but I mean excel in the fact that just nurture it. Like not excel in the fact that you have to be the best at it, but just nurture it.
So I love the word excel. Let's hang with unique. You know, today is brought to you by Unique and Excel. Excel for yourself. Better than you were this morning. Better than you were yesterday. Best day ever. Okay. There's a there's a Catholic school down in New Orleans, and I'm again like yourself. I'm going to butcher this, but I don't really care. I'm telling you a story. This is a parable. What if there were a Catholic school down in New Orleans and it's all girls, and people want to get in there. Uh, they come in the third grade all the way through graduating from high school, 12th grade. So they're in this environment for 9 years. The only thing that they're concentrating on is, and they have to make promises, about following rules. They're going to They're going to conform and they're going to wear the school uniforms. They're going to do this, that, and the other thing. They're going to learn about teamwork. They're going to learn about their value in a team, and that all they ever have to do is the best they can right now. And what is really cool about this is how supportive all of the students are for each other. There's
Hmm.
not one bit of anything with anyone talking about, who's this or who's that. There are no cliques. There's no point to it. So, how does that work? And is it a successful model? Well, as far as I know, since I don't know, 2003 or 2004, just to pick a date, every single student that's come into that school from third grade has graduated, and every graduate has gone to college. Every last one of them has earned a scholarship. How is that not a great model, for people to adopt and stop teaching for kids to look for differences and to separate themselves and all of that sort of thing. So I'm saying when you're taught from day one that you're special and you're unique, and we're going to help you find that talent here while you're here for the next 9 years. And not only are you going to get that support, from the teachers, and the administration, you're going to get that support from every single other student in here, because that's what we do.
Yeah.
So the output of this also to Austin was these two girls who took on a mathematical challenge, and there have been all sorts I mean, thousands of different algebraic proofs for the Pythagorean theorem. The a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and a right triangle property and all that good stuff. So uh, in history, there's been one person who's ever been able to do it with trigonometry. It's virtually been called impossible. Well, two sophomore girls from this school, independent from each other, both solved it using trig. And then we're able to demonstrate it, demonstrate the proof with drawings. And without getting too deep into the weeds here, I think you get on this bus hoping that what you do is give kids a self-worth and a self-value. They can't take drugs, they got to treat people well. There's rules, okay? And once they know the rules, they play because it works. And then by the time they get out of school, I don't think somebody, what's an 8-year-old in third grade, I don't think they can identify with going to college at that point. It's just a concept. However, isn't it kind of neat that human beings can go through a culture like that and have a high probability of at some point really amounting to something really great in the future? And I'm not going to talk about that because we've got people in industry, CEOs of companies. I mean, we're talking about folks that are chemists and have patents, and it's just kind of a neat way to grow human beings, in my particular opinion.
Yes, yes. What that makes me think of, and ties in so well with a little bit about what Jan said, but what you just mentioned, Bill, about how amazing to grow up in a culture like that. Because beside what most people might want to believe, there actually are cultures, and the reason I'm gonna share why I'm bringing it up, but there are cultures that actually nurture, which is one of the terms you used, people who are either indigo identifying or neurodivergent, and it's not really for the reasons you would think. Um, but to, in a nutshell, it's empowerment, and it's not like one person works with one person. It's like at that school, everyone's kind of playing their own part, and it compounds on each other, and there are entire cultures based on. I mean, I think even locally, well, not to me, but in Hawaii, I think it's called mahu, are one of the terms of people. I won't go into that, but just sticking to neurodivergent here, there are many cultures where those people are like revered for, these are the people that need to be sharing perspectives about XYZ. And then they get help kind of honing in on what is it that makes this person special. They don't see him as broken or, play the comparison game. They're almost like, oh wow, cool. This is something to be celebrated. And I don't Yeah, empowerment. It's all about empowerment. That's what I hear you describing.
Sure. And can you describe what neural divergent would look like in our community?
Uh, yeah, I mean, neurodivergent is just a umbrella term, really. And simple definition to easy to swallow is it's a unique way of processing and experiencing reality. That's all it is. I mean, you can classify a bunch of DSM-5 classifications under it, like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder,
Oh,
psychosis, borderline personality. Without attaching to that label, everybody could be considered on some kind of spectrum, so to speak, neurodivergent. The reason why, well, let's not get into the reasons why. The important part to remember is that, like you said, uniqueness is not something that needs a label to it because we're all unique, regardless. Without the label, we're already unique.
yeah.
But I think a big part of it, though, does come down to self acceptance of who you are. And depending on your culture, like if you're not in a culture or that school that has, the external is kind of empowering you and supporting you and really getting you to hone in on what makes me me and why am I experiencing this life the way I'm experiencing it. But if you weren't, um, privileged with that, so to speak, it can make it more challenging. And that's when, at least in my own journey, self acceptance had to, well, I guess awareness first, but then I had to accept it. I had to accept it to know where I was, to know then where I want to go.
Yeah. I would probably just reflect back to you that in the instance of the gals that we're talking about, they're spending very little, uh, existentialism time. They're basically working on the hardest projects they can ever do right now, and they're finding themselves, and they're getting those neat benefits, as a result of failing and accomplishing, of being around people who are supportive, of being in a situation where they were so embarrassed that they could hardly stand in front of other human beings, and a half a dozen girls all surrounding and saying, hey, you're all right, I'm glad you did it so soon. This will make the rest of everything easy, and
Yeah,
like somebody to kind of reinforce the bread trail of how you get to the you know to that place where you're comfortable with who you are as a human being, which I think is really important for people, don't you?
absolutely. Have you ever heard the phrase, the quickest way to success is to fail really quickly?
And often.
And often, yeah.
But I think that to me, what comes to mind is this whole idea of normalizing those things, because I think
Mhm.
so many people grow up thinking that failure is bad. They're raised in, whatever, whether they're raised in families where that's just, the way it's portrayed, that you're not supposed to make a mistake, or, this whole idea of afraid of being punished if they make a mistake. So I think it's the whole idea of, you know, being able to, you're supposed to make mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing and you're not learning and you're not moving forward. And the fact that, you don't wake up one day and all of a sudden you're an expert at something. It's not the way it works. And I think so much of the way it's portrayed, especially now with things like social media and everything, people only see the finished product
Yeah.
and they don't see all the work that went into something, you know, and all those errors. Like they just see, oh, okay, look at somebody, they're famous. Or look at somebody, they wrote a book, but they don't see the 1,000 revisions before or the 1,000 edits and things like that. And I think normalizing things like that. And that's what really childhood should be, is that experimentation. Like I think of it as experimentation and play, like the play of being able to you know, put something together, like put mud in whatever and then having it not work and realizing, okay, that didn't work. Like I have to do it another way.
Yeah, the rules are stacked against us. We go to a school system that has a limit to where they're going to put any more effort into you, and then it's going to be your personality or something that you have no control over at that age. They'll give you a reason for it, like you're on the spectrum or some stupid stuff like that. And I'm going to tell you right now, nobody ever accomplished anything unless they had somebody that was willing for them to stand for what they really wanted to do and be. It never is personal by yourself. You cannot do it. You don't know what you don't know to get to the next thing to fail at. And if you're in an environment like you're saying, Jan, if you're in a situation where it's it's a good thing to try to play big and not, just hang out and wait for the next easy thing to come along, because that's what it looks like Sly Stallone did. Or let's pick another big name. Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra. He was an overnight success, in 15 years. He didn't make any money until he was almost 45 years old. He went around and he was a torch singer, lead singer for Tommy Dorsey and a couple of other bands, but he didn't make any money. I mean, he was famous and it looked easy and all the rest. He made no money. Okay. So when was he successful? I don't know. Probably when he was, I don't know, 76, 77 years old, singing at Foxwoods, theater. I don't think he ever felt like he was successful. Did he have everything he ever wanted? Was he rich beyond, compare? All the rest of that? Where was the satisfaction? So let's not have a community that quits on us. Kids just don't have that much to fight back. No, I'm worth the time you're going to put into me. You wait and see. The ones that do that, holy mackerel.
Absolutely.
Austin, do you know the Thomas Edison story?
The light bulb.
Yes, but Thomas Edison was homeschooled. I don't know if you knew that or not. When he was in the
Somewhere
first
in there.
grade, when he was in the first grade, they sent him home with a note, and his mother said, the note said, Thomas, it says here that you are remarkable and you are absolutely a genius, and they do not have what it takes for you to maximize your education, and that I should do everything I possibly can, to make you as well educated as anybody has ever been. So there's that. He goes on through life. He does all the things that he does. And then when his mom passes away, he's going through her things. And he pulls up this note, and he had forgotten that there was even a note. And he just opens it up. And it's, Dear Mrs. Edison, I am sorry, but your son is an idiot. He does not possess even a modicum of intelligence to be able to do what we need him to do in this school. I am sorry, you're going to have to make other reservations for him because we're done here.
You know what that reminds me of? I think I actually shared this with you, Bill, in another conversation. It reminds me of this little kid, and he was trying to put a chicken on a bicycle that had a little like thing, and the headline of it was, he did it because no one told him he couldn't. In other words, sometimes all it can take is someone else believing in you, and that would be, what I talked about, like a privileged setting, an empowering setting. How much easier would it be if we believed in one another or just believed in ourselves? I also want to throw out there, I like that you are giving out so many different real life examples to this. And but I think for our audience, it's also not to discredit that these are, made up or imagining things. They're very much real. And I actually think Thomas Edison was classified as autistic. But so is Elon Musk. So
They
is,
didn't have the
anyway,
words, though.
so many people. Um, but they do, it's not something that they hold on to like you would wear your heart on your sleeve, so to speak, because it's just a label. It's just a label. You can further empower yourself by believing I am more than just this label. But it's not to diminish that maybe you are going through a troubling time and this label is helping you understand what it is that you're going through. Sure, because it's a very real experience. I mean, in my own personal experience, some of the things I do not wish on anybody, because it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible trying to figure out your own self from a mental and then your emotional and your physical. It's a mess. It's a nightmare. And I'm very blessed that I was kind of forced into, are you going to figure it out or are you going to not figure it out? And honestly, it took 29 years to do that. Um, but I just wanted to take a moment to say, this isn't about diminishing anybody when we throw out maybe these activating terms of label or, empower or just believe in somebody, because they are very real, but so is the fruit of the labor of understanding what is that uniqueness behind these labels.
What you're talking about is custom adjustum, human beings trying to engage every circumstance. We don't give them the training or the support. This is something that you and I we can look in different pockets and we can say, hey, um, why is Elon Musk successful? And there are so many other people who are on a spectrum have been given toys to play with the rest of their life. It breaks my heart because I, I was lucky enough in 2013 when my tech manager walked away from my business and left me bad. I mean, sorry, Chris, you just did, but he left me bad, and I went looking for a replacement. Yeah, I went looking for a replacement, and I got this one resume, which really intrigued me. He had just completed computer science, at a local community college, and so there were a couple of others that we got that looked really good too. So I interviewed three people. And the man who's working for me right now, who runs my technical support department, he does everything associated with um, clients' needs with regard to electronic stuff and cloud stuff working. Okay. And when we first met, he told me what he wanted to do. And it took him a full minute to get the words out. And I sat there with him and I thought to myself, I think this guy's investable, you know? And we went through early times where he did not understand computers. He did not understand when things didn't work according to the directions. And then I would ask him, what did you do? And he would come back with me at, you are making me so angry. I mean, we were at that level in the beginning. And I call him on the phone right now and I say, what do you got? He completely developed himself into the same type of functioning human being that people who don't know what Elon Musk started out life like. But he did it because he had a nurturing environment around him. And he did it because somebody was not willing to be pushed away by their anger. And I got to tell you, this is one of the most worthwhile employees I've ever had. He's worked for me for 12 years. Um, I trust him with my life. I trust him with my business. So all I'm saying to you is that it's easy to talk about it, but it's another thing to just be in a situation where that uniqueness, that special gift, there's a listening for it, and then the work that goes in is extraordinary. I don't even know if you have somebody around you, since you did offer yourself up as an example, who was there with you through every last bit of it. I think you do. And I think that's one of the reasons why your transformation, as ongoing as all of our transformations are, you're at this stage, right?
Yeah, I could give a couple people, two people that come to mind. One of my mothers. Um, you know, that's a hard job in amongst itself, especially and she was very educated, quote unquote, with mental health things, which is why I got kind of a leg up with understanding a lot of things that were maybe going on from a physical and from her viewpoint.
Yeah.
And then in my adult life, which I feel like now I need to go have a conversation with this guy and let him know, hey, like, you really made a difference in my life. But he stuck around in a lot of situations where he could have easily walked away. And what I'm recognizing right now, literally in this moment, is that how amazing that without even speaking it, he did hold on to a belief that, you know what, no, I know this guy has a heart. I know, like, didn't even have to say a word, but really that's what the energy was saying. And it absolutely, maybe not where I wanted to be, sure, but it definitely didn't send me in a place where I didn't want to be, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So all of this is coming back around full circle to the whole notion of how how's empowerment expressed in your world? Where are the things that you point to that are abrasive or causing tension, some type of conflict? Usually it's nonverbal. And where are the areas where you can use a little bit of what I used to call the cheese straightener, like to take the edge off of life and just make it smooth, from some sort of a hard to manage situation to something that works really, really well.
I would say that in itself is also a very unique thing, and part of the process, something to fall in love with is when you do start to say accept your own uniqueness, whether it's how you're processing your unique way of expressing yourself, what also is supporting you. And just for an example's sake, it could be I like to read because no one else can read what I'm reading. You're in your own world. Some people it's driving. Some people any artistic outlet. But find what is nurturing to you because yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I hope that adds to that.
Jan, have you got a thought, or should I jump in with a Shakespeare's quote?
Um, no, I mean, I think that along the path is to remember a few things to me, and that is, you talk about things, but to also practice compassion.
Yes.
Have compassion for yourself. So I think that along whatever path you're following, or if you're trying to nurture yourself in some way, is that element of just, you know, practicing that element of compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that, however, you talk about getting into a place of, and I think that's the gift of finding something that smooths out the edges, because I think that often it's in those spaces of quiet when we can turn down the volume a little bit, that we actually see those elements of compassion, or we can feel them. Where when we're very wrapped up and wound up, it's really hard to get that perspective, to actually be able to see that and cultivate and feel it. Because it's one thing to say it, oh, I'm compassionate to myself. It's like they're just words. And if you're not being compassionate to yourself, I guarantee your brain's sitting there going, you're full of it. you
No,
know,
absolutely. It's a master detector of
It's
bullshit.
all bullshit. That's right. It's a great bullshit detector. You know when you're lying to yourself. And so I think that if you can get into that zone or that flow state, whatever you want to call it, I think then you end up, it almost feels like there's a little bit of breathing room
Well,
around,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, around that. No, around that.
The whole notion of being kind to yourself or self-care or any
Self-care. There it
those
is.
words didn't exist in 1970. No, man. I gotta
And I
go
actually
find
don't
I
even
gotta go find
use,
myself. I'm
and
trying to say,
but
yeah,
I actually don't even love that word of self-care. Like,
whatever.
because I think people look at it now and they're like, it's like, I don't know. It just, I think for the majority of the population, that has a very negative connotation. And
Yeah,
so,
most
you
of
know,
the time we said, "Here's how I'm feeling," and they'd say, "Shut up, you're being selfish.
it's just,
What's wrong with you? Just eat your stuff and sit in the corner and shut up."
And that's like really the one of the challenges is how do we get this reframe ability that we all have, not just to help people who maybe not are exposed to, oh, I'm able to reframe this to benefit me. Whether it's self-care or nurturing or compassion, as Jan, like, 'cause I was going to throw out self-care too before Bill did when you mentioned compassion, because that was a big part of what I had to go through. I had to really understand my own no label, no meaning definition. What is my gnosis about self care? That self care would have been the label. Doesn't make it any less of a truth. What made it unique was the awareness I put on it, my understanding of it, and that's really what the whole neurodivergent. That's what it is. It's understanding your frame of how it is unique, and if
Yeah.
we all understood that, we could all support each other with compassion.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, but see, here's the really cool thing about that, Austin. that if somebody ever just took the time to ask enough questions, there wouldn't be any question on whether or not they understood. You know what I mean? And one of the big breakdowns and the hardest part about being a kid when I was growing up was nobody was interested in understanding doodah. You know, they had their own head full of whatever was going on. They were fighting to, we didn't have credit back in those days, and in my particular household, we had a great family. Everything was really cool. I never really realized, that we lived any differently than anybody else. But I always like to say I was 17 years old before I heard the word leftovers. You know, we lived in a nice house. My dad had a good living. We drove nice cars. All of these things. We always had at least 2 or 3 sets of really nice clothes. We got new clothes. My mother would put them on layaway, and we'd have them for every September. And we went to school, and that was all great. But the rest of life, like, why do I feel this way when I'm around girls? And who I got my education from was from my peers, and older guys. The reason you're feeling that is whatever. But where we are right now is we have new language that people can either use as a further distancing tool, or they can use it to try to create some understanding. And I think that's great. To allow people to just be themselves, granting being, I think that's the best gift we can give another person. Jan calls, and I love how you say it, holding space for someone.
Holding space, yes.
And these are the kinds of things where, intellectually, you can't get it until you've actually done it. It's like riding a bicycle. You can't have balance until you've actually successfully ridden a bicycle.
Austin used a word before, and I was actually having a conversation with a client this morning because she was talking to me about something and referring to, one of her grandchildren. And she said to me, they're broken. And, and I just brought to her attention to be careful of using that word, because that reminds me of the fact that, someone needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And I just feel that that's what, when you talk about holding space, or the fact of like those things, is the fact that in that uniqueness and in that authenticity, and even in the labeling, like, no one is broken. And I'm gotten very, very cautious about looking at people like that, like having that enter my mind, or even referring to myself like maybe there's an aspect of me that's broken, yes, but I'm not in my entirety. I'm not like this broken person. I think of a crumbling piece of pottery or something, like as an image that comes to mind. And I don't really think there's any, I mean, I look and I think the problem with labeling is the fact that when it becomes too generalized, like you categorize a group of people as a label, or it has that ability of like that label, it means they're broken. It means
Yes.
that there's something negative or wrong with them. That's when a label becomes harsh and like almost unworkable. It's like, or confining in some way, like it's limiting.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and there is no space around it then. And it just feels like when people, labels are great. I mean, I come from a science background. We label everything. Everything has a name and everything has a label. But once you've defined it like that, it's almost like it becomes them in their entirety.
Yeah, overly attached to it.
That's right. And it's like it's that person, and that's all they are, is that label. And there's nothing else.
Because even science evolves, but we use the absolution of language to measure that science, but it's still evolving. So why wouldn't any other label why wouldn't any use of language be the same, whether it's a neurodivergent, whatever? Because science isn't broken, a person isn't broken. They're evolving. We're all evolving.
That's right. And so that's where labels get to be like,
What science says is, oh, we mislabeled that.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They do say that. We
We
mislabel
thought we knew something, but no, it was just gas, you know.
And that happens in the medical field all the time since I've been throwing out this whole neurodivergent thing in the DSM-5, specifically autism. There's a reason why it's ASD, autism spectrum disorder now, and not they don't use autistic type 1 or type 2 and Asperger's because it's evolved. The labeling no longer fit this thing or whatever.
You
You
want to know
just be
what?
amazed. The more you learn, the more you empower yourself. If I left you with nothing else, leave with that.
Well, not to throw water on the whole conversation, but I think when people start getting into distinguished labels, coming up with new things to sell books or white papers or have new drugs identified that will cure whatever the hell it is they're talking about, they're going past a situation that it might just be holistic. Someone might just need a hug, you know, and maybe just be listened to for a minute, and maybe they don't process the world quite the same as most people do. But I'm going to tell you what people who have a hard time getting out, when they finally do, it's freaking magic. You know, I have gone through 12 years of miracles and breakthroughs with a man who barely could carry out a conversation, who I send him out on customers' sites right now, and they all think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. He gets no comments about, oh, he's a little off, or no, there's none of that. He's a functioning guy, and he's a real good guy, and it's fun to watch him laugh. He didn't do that at all for the first 3 years that I knew him.
Yeah, I can actually honestly relate to that. Like there
Yeah.
were times I couldn't hold a conversation, or I would go into a situation and I would have to physically remove myself. And I'll also second this holistic thing. I feel like me expanding my own awareness and really, really jumping into my unique spirituality saved my life all over again. Truly.
Yeah.
I think there are situations where we tend to do that. I mean, there are circumstances where we tend to go in and not say a word or not feel comfortable saying a word. I mean, I know I've evolved in my personal circumstance and situations where I would not have said a word or gone out and sort of with certain people or with groups of people. And then that's where the value of community and cultivating who you are becomes very valuable, because then hopefully you get to the place where you can and you don't feel less than or vulnerable, or you know you just feel like it doesn't, and you go in and knowing from my own experience, and there are points, and because I'm in those circumstances still, where I have enough and I kind of feel like, okay, I've done it. I've gone into this conversation. I've been around these people for whatever, how many days or weeks or hours. And I need my own space, and I just need to be by myself, or I need to be with Tonka or whatever, and so I think that every circumstance is different. And I don't think it's not a cookie. It's not a one size fits all. And it's not in every circumstance is the same, and I think that that's the gift of like starting to learn about yourself.
Yeah. And
And
wouldn't you say that that's where the self care comes into recognizing what is working for me? What do I need in this moment?
Mhm, exactly. And being able to know that. And then there are certain, and being able to navigate that and be okay with it.
The
And
acceptance
acceptance,
without
it's
having to explain it away or label it. If you can
labor.
get to that point quickly, you got a shot.
That's right. And just
Yeah, I'll add to that. I literally say this to myself as often as I can remember it, which is I have no need to validate my worth through others. Because for many, 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 many years, I literally lived my life for everybody else, but I was completely unaware of it. I thought that was just the way things were, whether it was labels or people pleasing, et cetera, et cetera. And just that small shift of, oh, I get to I get to live Austin. Austin gets to live Austin's life.
Mhm.
Nothing better.
Major.
That's fantastic. I think are at the point right now where we need to put a post-Easter bow on this. You know what happens is we start out with maybe some ungerminated seeds and we wind up with a bouquet by the time we're done with an hour. There's so much more to talk about, all the way along with what we've been discussing today. But I think what I love, and here's my 2 cents. I love that people are valuable, they're unique, they need to be nicer to themselves, shall I say. And they need to be taught that that's not only okay, but it's extremely important and there's nothing else. You have to give yourself the room to not know. You have to give yourself the room to be in a situation and it's not like you have something to say. You don't have any words at all and they're not coming out. I think we've all been in those situations. But at the same time, don't spend too much time looking in when you could be busy building things and getting it wrong and then getting it right and then getting it wrong and then getting it right. That satisfaction that comes out of accomplish something in the world, there's nothing like it. That's my 2 cents.
Jan, you got 3 cents. I'll add two more. We'll make 7.
Okay, no, you can go first, Austin, and I'll go after.
I love it. Inflation already right before our eyes.
Right.
Ah, gosh. You know, in a nutshell, loving yourself. What does it mean to love yourself? Um, Maybe even think about how do you want to feel, like loved? Because often I think that's a common thing that people, universally, we want to be loved, but we look kind of have a tendency to look past. Well, what does it mean for me to love myself? And maybe I'm biased, but when I really started to just love who I was, how I was, et cetera, it it came back. It reflects back. Maybe not in the kind of love I'm looking for, but that energy, that magnetism, and it only helps your own healing. It helps you actually learn, oh yeah, it's okay to be loving myself. But it doesn't start until you start.
So based on what you both said, I guess, and if you couldn't even, because I think of the fact that like love yourself, even that for a lot of people is like, how do I do that? And I think I think of the word that always comes to my mind when I think of that, and that's embrace myself. Because I think that that word embrace, like holding yourself in a fond embrace, a nurturing embrace, it means like to encircle, to like accept. That word embrace seems to like sum it all up to me. And so I don't necessarily need to love all the parts of myself, but I can embrace, like, I can bring them in and realize that's who I am. And so I love that word. Like, I can wrap my head around that. Like, that seems doable to me. Loving all the aspects of myself sometimes seems a little bit far fetched. Kind of like, but
No
then
idea what you're talking about, Jan.
yeah. Thank you, Bill. I'm glad I'm here alone.
Exactly.
but
You're the only one on the planet.
And
That's
that's
right.
the beauty of bringing together multiple perceptions, because then you start to realize the bigger picture of how all the perceptions make up the understanding of what that is. I couldn't have explained it alone, if that makes sense. So it's almost like harmonious that you would have that reflection and be able to then be like, oh yeah, and this is what came up for me, because now I have a better understanding of what I was trying to say.
Well,
No,
and then another thought is how do you get access to loving yourself? Start by describing the things in your life that you love because you're you. I get these things in my life because I'm me. Nobody else gets to get this. And in your world, Jan, it might be Tonka, it might be your conversations with me every once in a while. They work out, whatever. The great people you introduce me to and I introduce you to, et cetera, et cetera. It's, when you start to get that people aren't expecting anything more from you than you have to give, that really opens things up for you to give everything. And that's where you don't have to talk about love anymore. You're living it, you know?
And you don't go in with any particular agenda. Like, we don't have a plan when we get on these calls or these recordings. It's like you go into a conversation or an experience not expecting anything
Right.
except for the experience of being with someone else, but not with, oh, this is what I'm expecting to get out of it, or this is what I hope the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's liberating almost because there's not as much weight on your authentic expression. You know, it's like being with a good friend or your grandma, as we mentioned in the earlier. You know, you're not judging what you're telling your grandma. You're sharing everything you can with her.
Well, I think everybody's got a pretty good idea of all about Bill or all about Jan or all about Austin at this point. Jan, is there anything you want to say to kind of like wrap up the whole deal?
No, I guess I would take it. I love what we shared about that whole idea of loving yourself or, as I referred to as embracing yourself. So maybe just like you said, start with a few things that you love about yourself,
Yeah.
and then maybe expand those out. So maybe you can't love the fact that you have that you do this, but can you embrace it?
That's great. Austin, how about you?
Two things. One, every moment is a new moment. And two, Rumi said it best. You are not in the universe is in you.
Hmm.
Well said. I like to say forward from here. With all that said, I'm going to invite all of you. Do it now. Don't wait. There's somebody who needs to hear from you today. Call them, text them, send an email. Let them know that your world works because they're in it. And also let them know that if at any time they've got any questions about their own self-care, they better be dialing your damn telephone number as fast as they can because you want to know. I think with all of that said, I want to say thank you to my dearest buddy and my twin. You're the evil twin. And Jeremias. And my new buddy, Austin Jacob.
I'm honored.
Both are fabulous. I'm Bill Correll, and this is Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, and we're so happy to have spent time with you today. Y'all be good.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.